Welcome to the world of fear. This is Tale of Darkness, where every story drags you deeper into the darkness. Stories that will quicken your heartbeat. The first night without her was the kind of silence that eats at your bones. I remember lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the emptiness of the house pressing down on me. The kind of quiet that isn't just an absence of sound, but a presence in itself, thick and watching. Grief already had me in its claws, but that night, it wasn't grief that kept me awake. It was something else. I'd always thought that when my mom passed, the hardest part would be the memories. Seeing her chair empty at the table, the way the smell of her cooking lingered in the curtains. But that first night, I realized I wasn't just mourning her absence. I was afraid. I couldn't explain it, not to myself, not to anyone else. The house creaked as old houses do, but these weren't ordinary noises. I know the difference between a board expanding in the night and the sound of deliberate footsteps. And those were footsteps, slow, measured, pacing the hallway outside my door. I held my breath, convinced it was some lingering trick of grief. That maybe I wanted so badly to hear her moving around that my brain invented the sound. But the longer I listened, the clearer it became. Someone was out there, and then came the shadow. I saw it stretch across the bottom of my door, long and distorted, like someone was standing just beyond it, waiting. My throat went dry. I wanted to call out, say her name, say Mom, just once more. But the part of me that still clung to reason knew better. My mother was gone. She had been lowered into the ground that morning. Whoever, or whatever, stood outside my door. It wasn't her. The air in my room turned cold, so cold my breath fogged when I exhaled. I pulled the blanket to my chin, the way a child does when they believe the covers will protect them, though I was old enough to know better. And still, I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't do anything except wait. Then the humming started, a tune so faint I thought at first it was in my head. A lullaby, the one she used to hum when I couldn't sleep as a kid. Only it was wrong now, off, key, stretched out, broken in places like someone was trying to remember the notes but couldn't. That was when I knew I wasn't dreaming and I wasn't hallucinating. The sound drifted through the door, filling the room, wrapping around me like icy fingers. I wanted to believe it was her, I really did. But every instinct in my body screamed that whatever was humming that lullaby wasn't my mother. I pressed my hands over my ears, shut my eyes, and told myself it would stop. It had to stop. But when I opened them again, I saw something that froze me to the mattress. The shadow under my door wasn't standing still anymore. It was crawling on all fours, scratching softly against the wood, as if it was searching for a way inside. And here's the part I've never told anyone, not even the people who begged me to talk about it. I whispered her name. I whispered Mom. The scratching stopped. The shadow paused, and then it moved closer. But before I explain that night, I need to tell you who my mother really was. Before I tell you what happened in the days after she died, you need to understand who my mother really was. To everyone else, she was the woman who worked at the library, the one who always smelled faintly of old books and peppermint tea. She had this quiet kindness that drew people in, neighbors who'd stop by for advice, kids who'd hang around just to hear her read aloud. But to me, she was more than that. She was my anchor, my compass, the person who could turn even the worst day into something manageable. She packed my school lunches in a way that embarrassed me at the time. Little notes scribbled on napkins, reminders that I was loved, drawings of cats with crooked whiskers. I used to crumple them up before anyone else could see, but the truth is, I always read them first. I always smiled. Nights were our favorite. She'd make us cocoa, not the powdered kind but from scratch, with milk simmering on the stove and a splash of vanilla she swore made all the difference. Then she'd sit on the edge of my bed, humming softly, and spin these stories, fairy tales, ghost stories, even strange family legends she claimed were passed down for generations. I never knew how much of it was true, and I never asked. With her, the line between real and make-believe didn't matter. It all felt safe when it came from her lips. But here's the thing, as warm and open as she was, my mother carried secrets. I didn't notice them at first, not until I was old enough to realize that most parents don't lock their bedroom door every single night. I mean locked, with the key removed, no exceptions. Sometimes I'd get up for water, or to use the bathroom, and see her door at the end of the hall, sealed shut, a thin strip of light visible at the bottom. Once, when I pressed my ear against the wood, I could have sworn I heard whispers, like a low chant, words I didn't understand. When she caught me, her face went pale, not angry, not annoyed, scared. She just shook her head and told me never to do that again. I didn't, but I never forgot. Another thing, she had rules, odd ones. I wasn't allowed to keep mirrors in my room. They're bad for sleep, she said, as if that explained everything. When storms rolled in, she always unplugged every electronic in the house, muttering that lightning carries more than electricity. And if I ever woke in the night and heard her walking through the halls, I wasn't supposed to call out. She said it wasn't safe to. I know how that sounds, crazy, paranoid, but when you grow up with something, it doesn't feel strange. It just feels normal. That was my life, love, warmth, laughter, and rules, and I loved her, rules and all. We had our little inside jokes, like how we pretended our old cat was a reincarnated detective because of the way he'd glare at strangers, or how we'd rate the clouds on car rides, giving them personalities. Those were the moments that made the house glow with life, which is why her absence left such a void. Imagine a place always filled with light and warmth suddenly going dark, the laughter ripped out, leaving only echoes. That was what the house felt like after she died, hollow, like it had been waiting for her to leave. And maybe that's why I started to remember the locked doors, the rules, the whispers in the night. Because grief doesn't just remind you of the love you lost. It also forces you to see the things you tried so hard to ignore. Those locked doors, the ones she never explained, they mattered more than I ever could have imagined. The day my mother died didn't feel real. It wasn't slow or expected, the way people talk about when illness drags someone down. There was no gradual decline, no warning signs that I could cling to later as explanations. It was sudden, sharp, like a knife cutting through the fabric of my life in one clean stroke. One moment she was here, humming in the kitchen as she stirred a pot of soup, and the next she was gone. They told me it was her heart. That phrase, "her heart gave out," was repeated so many times by doctors, neighbors, even family, that it became meaningless, a string of words strung together like beads on a necklace that didn't fit. Because I knew my mother, she was careful. She took walks every evening. She brewed teas she claimed kept her spirit balanced. She wasn't the type to just collapse, but that's what they said happened. Collapsed in the middle of the kitchen, a ladle still in her hand. I didn't cry at first. Not when they told me, not when they wheeled her body away. My mind just split like there were two of me, one watching the events play out, the other refusing to believe them. People talk about denial as if it's a choice, but in that moment it was instinct, survival. If I admitted it, if I felt it, then everything would shatter. The funeral was a blur. I remember the cloying scent of lilies, the too bright sunlight that made everything feel wrong, like the world had no right to keep shining. I remember the endless stream of people pressing my hands, murmuring hollow condolences, faces blurring into one another. She was a wonderful woman. She'll be missed. Words that meant nothing, spoken in voices that seemed rehearsed. But what I remember most was my family, the way they looked at me, not pitying, not just sad, nervous. Some of them wouldn't even meet my eyes, and when they did, their stares lingered too long, like they were afraid of something. My aunt leaned close as we stood by the grave, her breath sour with wine, and whispered, "Now that she's gone, you'll need to be careful." Careful of what? I wanted to ask, but her hand tightened on mine, and the way she looked at me made the question die in my throat. My uncle avoided me altogether, muttering prayers under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. A cousin hugged me stiffly, then whispered, "She didn't tell you, did she?" before pulling away, leaving me burning with questions I wasn't brave enough to voice. It wasn't grief I saw in their eyes. It was fear. The night of the funeral, I sat in my room staring at the black dress I'd crumpled on the floor. The silence of the house was unbearable. I kept expecting to hear her footsteps, the clink of dishes in the sink, the hum of her voice. Instead, I was met with nothing but that same suffocating stillness. That was the first night the emptiness settled into my bones. I thought about her locked bedroom door, about the rules she had given me, the whispers I'd overheard but never understood. I thought about the way my family seemed more relieved than heartbroken, like they were glad something had ended, and I couldn't shake the feeling that her death wasn't natural, that maybe her heart gave out, wasn't the whole truth or even part of it. I kept circling back to my aunt's words, "Now that she's gone, you'll need to be careful." Careful of what? Of who? I didn't have an answer that night, only a gnawing dread that whatever my mother had been protecting me from the thing she'd built her rules and rituals around was no longer held back. It was the night after the funeral when things truly began. It was the night after the funeral when things began to change. At first, it was small. The kind of things you could almost convince yourself weren't real if you wanted to. A glass on the counter that wasn't where I'd left it. A chair angled differently at the dining table. A window cracked open when I knew I had locked it. Little slips, tiny wrongnesses that I chalked up to exhaustion. Grief makes people forgetful. That's what I told myself, but there were other things harder to explain away. The house began to smell like her again, not in the natural way, not like lingering perfume clinging to fabric. This was sharp, new, too fresh. She wore this lavender perfume that soaked into the wood of the house over the years, yes, but this was stronger, as if she'd just walked by me. Sometimes it would hit me as I climbed the stairs, like a sudden wall of fragrance. Other times it would drift under her locked bedroom door, curling into the hallway until I swore I could almost see it, shimmering like smoke. I remember one night in particular. I'd set my phone down on my desk, screen lit up with a half-written text to a friend, and when I turned back from the closet, it was gone. I searched the floor, the bed, the drawers, nothing. My heart was pounding, the way it does when you're sure you're losing your mind. Finally, I gave up, collapsed into bed, and pulled the blanket over my face. The next morning, the phone was back, sitting neatly on the desk, screen black, as if it had never moved. I told myself I was tired. I told myself my brain was scrambling reality, bending things under the weight of her absence. But then the dreams came. The first dream was soft, almost tender. My mother stood at the foot of my bed, humming that same lullaby she always sang when I was little, the one that felt like it belonged only to us. I felt warm, safe, but then I noticed her face. She was smiling too wide, lips stretched to show teeth, and her eyes weren't her eyes. They were too dark, bottomless, like staring into a tunnel that had no end. I woke up shaking, gasping for air. The next night I dreamed again. This time she was closer, leaning over me, whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but they were wet, sticky sounds, slipping into my ear like something alive. I thrashed, trying to wake up, but her hand pressed against my chest, holding me down. The pressure was unbearable, crushing. When I finally broke free and jolted upright in my bed, my chest still ached as if her palm had truly been there. I told myself it was sleep paralysis. That's what everyone says when nightmares bleed into waking life. But I couldn't shake the memory of her smell, thick and suffocating in the room, clinging to my sheets long after I woke. And then came the night that proved it wasn't just dreams. I was asleep, buried under the blankets, when I heard it again, the humming. At first I thought I was still dreaming, but then I realized my eyes were open. I was awake. The sound wasn't in my head, it was in the house. I froze, heart hammering, listening. The tune floated up the stairs, slow and broken, just a little off key. My mother's lullaby, the same one from the dreams. I sat up in bed, every nerve in my body screaming at me to stay still. But the song grew louder, closer, until I could hear the words she used to murmur when I was small. Only this time they sounded warped, drawn out, like someone was trying to remember them but couldn't quite get it right. For a moment I let myself believe. I wanted so badly to believe it was her, that she had come back to comfort me, that I wasn't alone. But deep down I knew better, because the sound wasn't coming from my room. It was coming from downstairs, and here's the part that still makes my blood run cold. The humming didn't stop when I held my breath and listened. It changed, it slowed, and then it rose into words, words spoken in my mother's voice. I didn't leave you. I clutched the blanket to my chest, trembling. I'm still here. I wish I could tell you it was just a dream, just my grief twisting reality. I wish I could tell myself that even now, but I can't, because it wasn't a dream. I was awake. I was listening, and I wish it had just been my imagination. But then I found the diary. I found the diary 2 days after the humming started. It wasn't hidden in the usual sense, not buried in a box, not shoved in an attic trunk. It was in her room, tucked in the bottom drawer of her dresser, right beneath a neatly folded stack of nightgowns. Almost as if she wanted me to find it, but only after she was gone. Her room had always been off limits. The locked door, the strict rules about privacy, those were boundaries I'd never dared to cross. But grief makes you reckless, and fear makes you desperate. I had to know what she'd been hiding all those years. The diary was bound in black leather, its spine cracked with age, the corners frayed from handling. No title, no name on the front, just blank, ordinary leather. My hands shook as I opened it, as if I already knew that once I read those words, I'd never be able to unknow them. The first few pages were ordinary enough. Notes about work, little reflections about me growing up, descriptions of afternoons that I remembered, me playing in the yard, her watching from the porch, cups of tea gone cold on the railing. They were sweet, even comforting. But then the tone shifted. The writing grew frantic, letters etched deeper into the paper, ink blotting in dark smears. The entries started talking about shadows, not metaphorical ones, real ones. Figures she saw in corners, reflections that didn't match, whispers crawling through the walls at night. The price is getting harder to pay. They are watching her now. They must not have her. My heart raced as I flipped page after page. She'd been living with something I never saw, something she shielded me from. Every word dripped with paranoia, or maybe it wasn't paranoia at all. Maybe it was truth. One entry stopped me cold. Do not let her look in the mirror after midnight. They move easiest through glass. I reread it 3 times, my hands going clammy. It wasn't just about mirrors. It was about me, about protecting me. Another, the lullaby draws them near, but it also keeps them calm. If she hears it, she must not answer, never answer. The words crawled up my spine, ice cold, because I had answered. I had whispered "Mom" into the darkness. Flipping further, I found passages that didn't even look like English anymore. Jagged symbols, circles with lines cut through them, things that looked more carved than written, gouged into the page as if the pen was a knife. Between those were prayers, or maybe spells, written half in Latin, half in broken phrases I didn't understand. And then, the most terrifying line of all. When I am gone, the house will change. She must follow the rules, or they will claim her. The rules, the locked door, no mirrors, no calling out at night. It all made sense now, or at least as much sense as horror can make in the moment. She hadn't been paranoid, she'd been protecting me. I wanted to stop reading, but I couldn't. The diary was a wound I couldn't stop picking at. Every page pulled me deeper, whispering secrets I didn't want but couldn't refuse. If she disobeys, they will come through me first. My face, my voice, my body, but it will not be me. I slammed the book shut at that one, heart pounding so violently I thought I might pass out. It explained the dreams, the humming, the wrong smile. I sat there on her bedroom floor, clutching the diary, knowing 2 things for certain. 1, my mother had been keeping something from me, something monstrous, something unearthly. And 2, whatever it was, it hadn't left with her. It was still here. I should have burned that diary. The moment I read those words, I should have torn the pages out and fed them to the fire. I should have erased them, destroyed them, pretended they never existed. But I didn't, because some part of me needed to know everything, needed to understand the secrets she'd carried, the ones that made my family look at me with fear instead of grief. I thought knowledge would keep me safe. I thought if I followed the rules, I could outsmart whatever haunted this house. I couldn't have been more wrong. You'll understand soon why I should have burned that book, why I should have locked it away and never let its words touch me. Because the worst thing you can do with rules like those is break them, and that night I broke the first rule. The first rule was simple: do not look in the mirror after midnight. I hadn't meant to break it. It wasn't rebellion or carelessness. It was an accident. I'd been tossing in bed, sheets tangled around me, mind buzzing with everything I'd read in the diary. Sleep wouldn't come. Every creak of the house, every shift of the air made me think of her words. They move easiest through glass. When the red glow of the alarm clock read 12:03 a.m., I finally got up. I told myself I'd grab some water, maybe calm down. But when I walked down the hall, I forgot. I forgot that the mirror still hung at the end of the corridor. The antique oval one my mother had once covered with a bedsheet when I was younger. I turned just slightly, just enough, and there she was. My mother, for a moment my heart soared. She looked almost exactly as she had in life. Same soft hair falling around her shoulders. Same familiar cardigan she wore when she wanted comfort over style. Her lips curved into that gentle smile I'd missed so much. But then I realized something was off. Her smile was too wide. It didn't stop where it should. It stretched and kept stretching, pulling her cheeks into sharp angles that weren't human. Her eyes were too dark, pupils swallowing the irises until they were endless black holes. And worse, Her reflection didn't match mine. I stood frozen in the hall, trembling, but in the mirror my shoulders relaxed, as if the body in glass wasn't afraid at all. She tilted her head and her neck bent too far, almost a full 90 degrees. I stumbled back, hand flying to my mouth to stifle a scream. The figure in the mirror didn't move with me. She stayed still, her eyes boring into mine, her smile fixed. And then she spoke. Her voice was my mother's voice. That same tone that had once told me bedtime stories, once soothed me when I cried. But now it was low, syrupy, thick with something rotten. "I didn't leave you," she whispered. Tears burned my eyes. My body screamed at me to run, but my heart, the stupid, desperate part of me that still longed for her, kept me rooted to the spot. "I didn't leave you. You opened the door." The words hit me like a punch. My breath caught in my throat. What door? What had I done? I shook my head, backing away, but the reflection didn't mimic me. Instead, she pressed her hand against the glass. Long, thin fingers splayed out, nails far too sharp. The surface rippled like water disturbed. "Come closer," she murmured, her lips moving just slightly too slow for the words, "Let me in." I could hear my pulse thundering in my ears. Every survival instinct screamed don't, but a deeper pull gnawed at me, tempting me forward. It wasn't just her face, her voice, it was the promise. The possibility that maybe, somehow, I could bring her back. But then her smile faltered. Her lips trembled, and for one fleeting second, her expression shifted into something raw and desperate. Not a monster, not a ghost, but her, my mother. "Please," she begged, voice breaking. "It's cold. I'm so cold. Don't leave me out here." I nearly took a step. I swear I did. My toes curled against the wooden floor as I leaned forward, heart aching with the weight of her plea. But then her face split, not metaphorically, literally. Her smile tore wider, ripping her skin open at the corners, black ichor dripping down her chin. Her eyes rolled back, and the voice that came next was not hers. It was guttural, echoing, layered with tones no human throat could make. "You belong to US now." I stumbled backward, nearly falling. The mirror shook violently, the surface rippling like a storm-tossed sea. Cracks spidered out from where her hand pressed, glass splintering but not breaking. I ran. I didn't think, didn't look back. I sprinted down the hall into my room, slammed the door, and collapsed against it, chest heaving. For a long time I just sat there, listening, waiting for the sound of glass shattering, waiting for footsteps. But nothing came. Only silence. When I finally dared to look around, I caught my reflection in the small vanity mirror across the room. Only it wasn't me, not exactly. The girl in the glass was smiling. I ripped the sheet from my bed and covered the mirror, hands shaking so badly I could barely knot the fabric. My mother's diary fell open on the desk where I'd left it, the ink on one page smeared as though wet. "They will wear my face first. Do not listen. Do not trust." I pressed my fists into my eyes, sobbing, realizing too late that I had already listened. I had already trusted, and as awful as that was, some part of me knew the truth. My mother's reflection wasn't the worst thing waiting for me, and that's when I started hearing the others. If you think you'd have run away by then, you'd be wrong, because by then it was already too late. After the night of the mirror, something shifted. The house didn't feel like my house anymore. Corners seemed darker, doors seemed to breathe, and I felt watched even when I was completely alone. But the worst part wasn't the watching. It was the way they started following me. At first, it was little things. I'd catch shadows moving just at the edge of vision, always in the reflection of glass or screens. When I turned, nothing was there. I told myself it was my nerves, grief twisting reality into paranoia. But then I started talking, not on purpose. It was like answering someone who wasn't really there. My throat would ache after long pauses, as though I'd been whispering back. I didn't remember the words, but people noticed. One afternoon at lunch, my friend Jenna stared at me across the table, frowning. "Who are you talking to?" she asked. I blinked at her, confused. I wasn't. She looked pale. "Yes, you were. You kept nodding and whispering, like someone was sitting right next to you. The seat beside me was empty. Completely empty." I laughed it off, but I couldn't shake the look in her eyes. Fear, not concern. The same thing happened in class. I felt my lips moving, unbidden, like a puppet being tugged by invisible strings. The teacher stopped mid-sentence, chalk still in her hand. She just stared at me, her expression shifting from confusion to recognition, and then she whispered, barely audible, "She's watching you now." My whole body went cold. I wanted to demand what she meant, but before I could, she turned back to the board and continued teaching as though nothing had happened. Not a word about it afterward. That night, I sat in my room, diary open, mirrors covered, trying to convince myself I wasn't losing my mind. But the air in the house was alive, vibrating with whispers I couldn't quite make out. It felt like I'd tuned into a radio frequency that wasn't meant for human ears. And then I started seeing them. Not my mother, not exactly. These figures were stretched wrong. They slipped through the hallway in jerks, like badly edited video frames. Their faces blurred, sometimes like static, sometimes like masks half melted. One crouched at the foot of my bed one night, a silhouette with arms too long, its head cocked like it was listening to my heartbeat. I froze, eyes wide, pretending to sleep. Every instinct told me, don't acknowledge it. If I moved, if I spoke, it would know. But then it leaned forward, close enough that I could feel the heat of its breath, and whispered in a voice made of many voices at once. "We are here because she asked us to be." I almost screamed. Almost, but terror pinned me silent. When I finally dared to open my eyes again, the figure was gone, though the sheets were still dented where it had crouched. From that night on, reality bled at the edges. My reflection lagged behind me by a second when I brushed my teeth. My phone screen lit up in the middle of the night, displaying text messages I never typed. Once, I woke to find all the chairs in the kitchen stacked in a perfect pyramid, balancing impossibly. I tried to tell myself it was stress, grief, hallucinations, but then other people started noticing. "Why are you smiling?" Jenna asked one morning, her voice tight. "I'm not," I said, her face drained of color. "Yes, you are." And I wasn't. I swear I wasn't. My lips were still, but she swore they were curled into a grin that didn't belong to me. By then, I'd stopped trusting my own senses. The diary's words circled in my head, clawing at me. "They will wear her face first, then they will wear yours." I don't know why I didn't run. Maybe part of me thought leaving would make it worse, that these things were tied to me, not the house. Maybe I was already too entangled to escape. But the truth, the horrible truth, was that a tiny piece of me didn't want to escape. That distorted version of my mother had whispered something I'd buried deep. You opened the door. Had I? Did I want her back so badly that I'd invited them in without realizing it? It wasn't just her anymore. I understood that now. Whatever I'd seen in the mirror had been only the beginning. There were others, many others, and they were patient. Sometimes at night, when the house went still, I'd hear them breathing in unison. A slow inhale, a slow exhale, as though the walls themselves had lungs. I tried covering every reflective surface, but it didn't matter. Windows fogged up with handprints I hadn't made. My laptop camera turned on by itself. I woke with bruises on my wrists, as though someone had gripped me tightly while I slept. And then came the moment that destroyed all denial. I woke up one morning to find my phone unlocked, lying on my chest. The gallery app was open. Inside were dozens of new videos of me, but I wasn't alone in them. In one, I was sleeping peacefully, until a dark figure bent down and whispered into my ear. In another, I sat up in bed, eyes open, but my face wasn't my face. It was smiling, wide and broken, even though I remembered nothing. And in the last video, the screen showed me holding the phone, staring directly into the camera, whispering words I couldn't hear, but my lips spelled them clearly. We're here now. The final proof came when my phone started recording things I didn't do. I used to think the worst part of grief was silence. The empty ring of a house when the voice you love most is gone. But I was wrong. Silence isn't the worst thing. The worst thing is when the dead start using your devices. The phone videos were only the beginning. At first, they were just unsettling. Clips of me tossing in bed, the screen flashing like someone had picked it up and set it down again. I told myself maybe I'd rolled onto it. Maybe it was a glitch, but then I saw her. In one video, the camera angle shifted so it caught the far corner of the room. My mother, my dead mother, was sitting on the edge of my bed. Not the way she used to, with warmth and patience. This version sat stiff, her head bent slightly to the side, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't blink once. Her face wasn't wrong, not distorted like in the mirror. That almost made it worse. It looked so much like her, like a photograph brought to life, frozen in one expression, that faint, unblinking smile. I deleted the video instantly. I didn't want proof, but when I opened my gallery again, it was back. Copied 20 times. After that, my phone became a parasite. Every morning, new videos waited. Sometimes of me, sometimes of the empty hallway. Once even of my own bathroom mirror at exactly 12:03 a.m. The same time I'd broken the rule. But it wasn't just the videos. The emails started next. They came from my mother's old account, the one I deactivated after her death. At exactly 3:00 a.m., my phone would buzz, and there it was, from Mom. The subject lines were always the same: come downstairs. Inside, the body of the email was blank. No text, no attachments, just those two words over and over, filling the page until I had to scroll. I didn't go downstairs, not at first. I'd stare at my darkened bedroom door and feel the weight of something waiting on the other side. But one night, curiosity, or maybe something stronger, dragged me out of bed. I held my phone like a flashlight, hands shaking as I padded down the stairs. The house creaked in ways it never had when Mom was alive. The living room was empty, silent, except my phone buzzed again. Another email. Subject line, turn around. I froze. My chest went tight. I couldn't move. Finally, I forced myself to look. The couch was no longer empty. She was sitting there, perfectly still, her face turned toward me in that same stiff angle, eyes wide. Not blinking, smiling, I dropped the phone. The screen cracked against the hardwood, and the sound startled me back into motion. I ran up the stairs into my room, slammed the door shut. But when I picked up the phone again, there was a new video waiting. This one was recorded from inside my room. It showed me entering, slamming the door, pressing my back against it, chest heaving. Then, seconds later, my mother stepped into the frame, standing behind me. Her hand hovered inches from my shoulder. I don't remember feeling it, but in the video she touched me. I wanted to throw the phone away, smash it into pieces, but I couldn't. Every time I tried, I froze, like something had rewired my instinct. Like part of me needed to keep watching, because the messages changed. They weren't just commands anymore. They became personal, familiar, things only my mother would say. Eat something. Don't forget your jacket. I'll always love you. And then the words twisted. You open the door, you let us in, you don't have to be alone. The last email wasn't blank. It had an attachment, a voice memo. When I played it, her voice, her real voice, whispered through the speaker, "It's better here, join me." And then she asked me to join her. I told myself there had to be a way to end it, some final act that would shut the door I'd accidentally opened. The diary was the only place I hadn't fully dared to follow, and so I read it again. There it was, hidden in shaky handwriting beneath an entry about protection. If she ever comes back wrong, bind her with the lullaby and salt. I didn't have much, just table salt, a lighter, and a voice that cracked every time I tried to sing. But it was enough to convince myself I wasn't helpless. That night, I prepared the house like a battlefield. Salt lines across the windows, circles at the doors, the diary open on the floor, trembling beneath my hands. My phone sat in the middle, screen black but humming, as though it were alive. At exactly midnight, the first note drifted through the house, her lullaby, soft at first, tender, so close to the sound I remembered from my childhood that I almost cried. But the notes bent in strange directions, warping into something jagged, discordant. A mother's song split open, bleeding into nightmare. The walls shuddered, lights flickered. My phone vibrated and lit up, camera on, recording without my touch. Then she came. She stepped out of the shadows near the living room, the shape of my mother, but not. Her face stretched too long, her smile cutting too wide. Her hair moved though there was no wind. Her voice, God, her voice, was two tones at once. My mother's gentle cadence layered with something crawling, something that scraped the inside of my skull. "Why would you banish me?" she asked. "I died for you." My throat closed. The words in the diary blurred. I forced myself to sing anyway, whispering the lullaby she had once sung to me, voice shaking but steady enough. She screamed, not in pain, at least not like anything human. It was the sound of wood splitting, glass cracking, every floorboard in the house snapping at once. The salt circles hissed as though burning, and figures, shadows without faces, pressed against the windows from the outside. "I gave you love," she crooned, her smile never fading. "I gave you safety, and you opened the door." I sang louder, tears running down my face, the salt circle beneath me glowing faintly. She lunged, her body contorting in jerks, like a video buffering on a weak connection. Her hands slammed against the invisible barrier just inches from my face. "You need me," she hissed, her voice twisting into a dozen overlapping whispers. "Without me, you're nothing. Without me, they'll come." The house shook harder. Pictures fell from the walls. Behind her, the faceless shadows crowded, pressing in, their heads cocking at impossible angles. I reached the final line of the lullaby, my voice breaking completely, but I forced the last note out like a scream. For a moment, just a moment, she faltered. Her smile cracked. Her head twisted violently, hair snapping like a whip. The shadows behind her dissolved into smoke, sucked back into the corners of the room. And then she was gone. The house fell silent, the air grew still. My phone screen blinked off, leaving me in the dark. I collapsed, sobbing, salt burning my throat. I told myself it was over, that the diary had saved me. But as I crawled into bed that night, something gnawed at the back of my mind. The way she'd said those words, "Without me, they'll come." I thought I had ended it. I thought I had closed the door. But I was wrong. Because last night, the emails started again, and the subject line wasn't from Mom. It's been weeks since that night, and I've been telling myself it's over. The diary is gone. I burned it, watched the pages curl and blacken until every word was ash. The house is quieter now. The lights stay on. My phone doesn't record me anymore, at least not when I'm awake. So yes, I survived, or at least, that's what I keep telling myself. Grief is strange. Some nights I can still smell her perfume. Some mornings I wake up with the faintest trace of her lullaby in my ears, like the residue of a dream I can't quite shake. But everyone who's lost someone knows that feeling, right? It's normal. It has to be normal. I laugh more now. I go outside. I talk to people without them glancing nervously over my shoulder. They say my color's back, that I look healthier, stronger. They don't see the cracks. They don't hear the way the house sometimes hums at night, like it's remembering something. They don't notice the mirrors. I've started covering them again, not all of them. Just the ones in the hall and the one in my bedroom. I tell myself it's superstition, a leftover fear, like keeping a nightlight on after childhood. But I don't let myself stand too close anymore. I don't let myself linger after midnight, because sometimes, just as I turn away, I swear I see it. Her, not my mother, not anymore. Me, my reflection holding a smile a fraction too long. My lips pressed together while hers curl upward, stretching into that wrong shape. Sometimes she whispers without moving her mouth. I can't hear the words, but I know they're not mine. Last night, I decided to test it. Just once, I pulled the sheet off the mirror in my room and stared. My heart was hammering, sweat running down my back, but I forced myself not to blink. At first, it was just me, pale, tired, ordinary. Then my reflection tilted her head, not me, just her, and her smile bloomed like a wound splitting open. Welcome back. She whispered. I ran. I tell myself that maybe it's trauma, maybe it's madness, but deep down I know the truth. You can't burn something that isn't paper. You can't banish something that's already inside. And if you've listened this far, maybe I shouldn't be telling you any of this, because these things spread. They travel in words, in stories, in attention. You let the wrong thing in by looking too long, by listening too closely. So do me a favor tonight, just one. If you've lost someone, check your mirrors. After midnight, just to be sure the reflection looking back is still yours. And if it isn't, well, maybe you'll understand why I don't know if I actually survived, or if I was replaced. What do you think?